Another loop that exists is called the for loop. And the for loop, sometimes they call it a definite loop because just by looking at it, you can kind of see how many times this loop is going to run. And it's a lot simpler to use than the while loop. Basically, what the for loop has is you give it kind of a list of items or a list of numbers, but basically it's a list of some items that you want to repeat some code on. So let's say I wanted to repeat printing the numbers from 5 down to 1, like we did with the while loop. So here I put all the numbers that I want to print in the list, and then I say for every I, and I here is a variable that's going to kind of refer to every one of these numbers in the list. So what is it that I want to do with every number in this list, the 5 down to 1? Well, I want to print it. So I print I. So here this for loop is saying for every variable that we're going to call I in this list, for every number in this list, we're going to call it I want you to print it. And so what this code does underneath is that it's going to start off a variable. So here it has it, the list 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So this is the list that's given for the 4. And it's going to start off the I and set it equal to 5. Okay, so I inside is 5. And then it's going to say, okay, what is it that you want me to do? And the code says, I want you to print I. So it's going to go, and if this is our printing, it's going to print 5. When it's done, it's going to say, I'm done with that. What's the next thing? Okay, well, the next thing is 4. So now I is 4. And so it goes and says, okay, what do you want me to do with I? Print I. It's going to print 4. And then when it's done, I is going to point to 3. And then I is going to point to 2. And then I is going to point to 1. So it's basically printing 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so this is how you would use a for loop. Now you can do it with numbers like this, or you can even do it with other things like strings. So here I have a list, and we're going to formally talk about lists in a future chapter. But here, when you put square brackets around some items, they're a list. And so here I have a list of 3 fruits, banana, apple, and grapes. And what I want to do for every one of these is I want to print the sentence, I love to eat, next to that word. So I want to say, I love to eat banana, I love to eat apple, I love to eat grapes. So here I'm going to say for, and I'm going to give any variable name here. I chose fruit, could have been I, but here I'm saying create me a variable called fruit and make it refer to these items. So initially fruit is going to be banana. So it's going to say I love to eat banana. And then it's done with that. So it's going to loop around and it's going to say, okay, what's the next fruit in this list? Apple. So now fruit is apple. It's going to say I love to eat apple. And then it's going to loop around to make it grapes and say I love to eat grapes. Then it's going to loop around and find the list is empty. So it's going to print done. So this is a nice way to print like a range of items or some items in a list. Okay, so for example, code here that does that. So let's say I wanted to print the numbers from 1 to 5 in the opposite order. So I can say for num in, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, print me num. So this is going to print the numbers from 1 to 5. It does it. Okay. Now, what if I wanted to print the numbers, some even numbers? Then I would say for num, let's say in 2, 4, 6. Print me num. So now it's going to print the 2, 4, 6. Okay, so it printed the 2, 4, 6. So whatever you put in that list, you just put any variable name to refer to it, and then you use that variable. So num is referring to the 2, then it refers to the 4, then it refers to the 6. Could have been num, could have been happy, you know, whatever variable you want to use. It doesn't really matter. It still works. Okay. So this is nice, you know, in that you can just put items in here. They don't have to be sequential. It could be 2, 64, and 96 could be like anything I want. Could be the names of people, you know, it could even be like apple and 64 and banana. And it'll still work. So any items in the list, it'll work. So you put a bunch of items and you just repeat the same thing for every item in this list. Here, all I want to do is print them. Now, can you imagine if I wanted to print the numbers from 1 to 100? Will this work? I don't think you want to write something like for I in, and then start writing all the numbers up to 100. So here, you know, the for loop will not be the one you probably want to use. With the syntax that we've learned so far, you probably want to use a while loop. However, I'll show you how you can actually use a for loop, and it's not hard. It's actually easy. So if you want to print, like I said, you know, a range of numbers, let's say from 1 to 10, well, with a while loop, you can do it. You know, you can say num equal 1, while num is less than or equal to 10, print me. So the first number I want to print is 1. I'm going to go until I hit 10, and what do I want to do? I print it. Now, what is this going to do? This is actually going to give us an infinite loop. So here, what we forgot to do is we forgot to say num plus equal 1. Okay. Now, if I wanted to write it with a for loop, I would say for num in, and here I put all the list of numbers, and I want to print n. So those two pieces of code will generate the same thing. Now, if I wanted to make it 1 to 100, updating this while is easy. All I have to do is just come change the 10 to 100, just add a 0. But for the for loop, I have to now type all the numbers up to 100, and that's going to be tedious. So what the for loop has that we can also use is something called a range function. And the range function, what you do is you give it a number, and it gives you back a list that's the numbers in that range. Now, do you guys remember when we did random and we had rand int and rand range? Rand range always started from what number? It always started from 0. And so if I said rand range 5, it will give me all random numbers, but starting with 0 up to 4. So it didn't include the end. This range function behaves the same way. If I just say 5, and let's try that out. If I come here and I say, let's just comment this out first. If I say for num in range 5, print num, it's going to print the numbers from 0 down to 4. So it gives you a range of 5 numbers, but it starts with 0. So this one starts with 0 and goes up to 4. So if I want to print the numbers from 1 to 5, I have to add 1. So I have to come here and say, nope, add me 1. So we need to add 1 to print the numbers from 1 to 5 instead of 0 to 4. So now it's going to print me the numbers from 1 to 5. Okay. So range just behaves like rand range that we kind of talked about before. All the rand range methods, functions that we learned have similar ones here, but without the rand part. So I can say range, give it a number, and it's going to give me that number of numbers starting with 0. I could also say I want numbers from 1 up to 6. Here, because I specified my beginning, it's going to start me from 1 instead of the 0, like here. But it's going to go, again, when it goes up to the 6, it doesn't include the 6. So here, it doesn't include the 5 because it's starting from 0. Here, it's going to include the 1, but it doesn't include the 6. So if we were to run this code, let's go and run this code. I say for num in range 1 to 6, print me num. What I'm going to see is that it doesn't include the 5. Okay, so this one starts with 1 and goes up to 5. Does not include. Okay, so the range functions always do that. Now also I can do a step. I can say I want the numbers from 1 up to 6, not including 6 in steps of 1. Or I can change this. So let's actually do some tests with this. Let's say here for num in range, I'm going to go 1 to 100 in steps of 2. Let's try that. And here what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that the separator is a space so that we can see them all on one line. Okay, so the numbers are going to be separated with spaces. Let's see what this does. Oh, I should say the separate the end. Sorry. Let's try one more time. Okay, so now it's starting from 1. Did it include the 100? No, it doesn't include the 100, and it's going in increments of 2. So it's giving me the even number. It's the odd numbers, but I want the even numbers. So I'm going to start it off with 2. And again, I find that it stops at 98, even though 98, if I add 2, I get 100, but it doesn't include the 100 because the range doesn't include the end, doesn't include the 5, didn't include the 6. It's not going to go include the 100. So this one starts with 2 up to 99 in increments or steps of 2. Now, the nice thing is that I can also go backwards. So let me show you that. So here, let's say I wanted to print the numbers backwards. Okay, so let's ask ourselves, what is the first number that I want to print? Let's say the first number I wanted to print was 100. What's the last number I want to print? It's 2. Okay, so we need to just go one more. And then here I'm going to say I'm going to go backwards. Okay, and so with the range, you can actually go backwards. If you do the step as negative, you can go backwards. So let's try that. So here it started with 100 because this is my first number. It went down to 1, so it included the 2. And then I'm saying go backwards. So it's saying, okay, 100, then when I'm done, I'm going to subtract 2, then subtract 2, then subtract 2. So this is kind of how do you want to update this variable when it starts off? Starting with 100, then how do you want to update it? And here I'm saying update it by subtracting 2. So we can actually even go backwards. So this one is going to start with 100 and go backwards by 2. So let's do some practice on the next slide. So here, if I want to run this for loop, and you can pause the video and figure out the answer before you see it. Here it says for num in 5, 10. So here I'm not using range or anything. I'm just giving 2 numbers in the list. So num, the first number is going to be 5. What do I want to do with the 5? I want to say 5 squared. So this is going to print 25 and then a space because I put a space in the end. And then it's going to come around. Num is 10. 10 squared is 100. So this is going to print me 25 space 100. Okay, this one. Here I'm saying range 5. So remember the range function says I'm going to give you the numbers, 5 numbers starting with 0. So this is the same as 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's going to print me 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 separated with spaces. Here we have for every num in the range 0 to 10, 2. Let's actually first think what numbers are included. So here includes 0, that's the first number. Then it's going to go up to 2 because we're adding 2. So 0, 2, 4, 6, 8. Does it include 10? No. So this is going to go from 0 up to 8. And what I'm doing is I'm taking this number, 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, and dividing them by 2. And when we do division, we always get a float. So 0 divided by 2 is 0. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 6 divided by 2, and then 8 divided by 2. And finally, this one is referring to all the numbers in the range what? So it's 20, so that means it's going to start with 0 up to 19. So it's going to look at all the numbers between 0 and 19. and then it's going to check that number that we're calling variable. What does the mod do? Do you guys remember? The modulus gives us the remainder. So here I'm checking if this number in the range from 0 to 19, if it's divisible by 4, when I check if the remainder is 0, that means I'm asking if it's divisible. I'm going to print it. Now, I'm also checking if it's divisible by 16. I'm going to print the word foo. So let's ask ourselves, what numbers from 0 up to 19 are divisible by 16? 0 is divisible by 16, and 16 is divisible by 16. So at 0 and 16, I should get foo. Now, what numbers are divisible by 4? 0, 4, 8, 12, and 16. So I should see the printout of 0, 4, 8, 12, 16, and after the 0 and after the 16, I should see the word foo. Okay, and that's what I get. Now, I know this was a dense class because while loops and for loops is a new concept, but what we're going to do for this classwork is practice both of them. So imagine that you're running on a treadmill, and this treadmill, when you run on it, every minute that you run on the treadmill, you burn 4.2 calories. And what we want to do is we want to see how many calories we're burning at 10 minutes, 15, 20, 25, and 30. So what I want to do is I want you to first write a loop, a while loop, that's going to display the number of calories burned at these intervals. Now let's ask ourselves, here, what's the first minute that I'm asking you to print at? Well, the first value, the first line I'm asking you to print at is when the minute is 10. Okay, so that means I'm going to have a number that starts with 10, like n equal 10 or minute equal 10. When do I want to stop? I want to stop when I reach 30. That means my while loop is going to have something like while minute is less than or equal to 30. Okay, now what's my update? After I do something for 10, how do I go to 15? I add 5. So that variable, I'm going to add 5 to it. That's my update. Now, what is it that I want to do? I don't want to print the minute. I want to print the calories burned. How do I get the calories burnt? Well, I multiply the minute by 4.2. And so here your while loop is going to start. Your starting variable is 10. Your test is when it's less than or equal to 30. And my update is increments of 5. And what is it that I'm doing inside? I am multiplying the minute variable by 4.2 to figure out how many calories I burned. So this is how you do it with a while loop. Now, to do it with a for loop, again, we are starting off 10, so we need a range. The range is going to start with what? 10. It's going to go in steps of what? 5. It's going to stop when it reaches 30. So I need to make sure that my range goes up to like at least 31 so that I include the 30. And then inside, you're also calculating the calories. Now, to get your columns to show up like this and match the HackerRank output, what you're going to do is after you print the minute, you're going to print 2 tabs. So the distance between the 10 and here the 42 is just 2 tabs. And remember, to do a tab, it's /t. So if you just do /t with no spaces between them and no spaces before the minute or after the minute, then you'll get the right output, the same output as on HackerRank.